Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our journey, our exploration, if you will, through the remarkable set released by the Criterion Collection earlier this year, which is this quite magnificent box set, which is called The Complete Films of Agnes Varda. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to focus in on one of the discs which is included as part of this great set, and it's given the title of Around Paris. So as we know from the other discs included in this great set, The Complete Films of Agnes Varda, each of the Blu-ray discs is centered around a particular theme, curated, and the films included on such discs therefore seem to be dealing with such theme in one form or another, which leads to, as I say, the curated order as allotted by the Criterion Collection. So we're not given the chronological order, but we're given an order based on these curated themes pursuant to said arrangement of discs in the Criterion Collection box set. Program 3, which is the third disc, is given the title Around Paris, Around Paris. And so each of the films included here seem to be dealing with the notion of the city during the time, and also the people and the place and the history that's associated with it, and how the characters seem to be embedded in the city, involved in the city, separated from the city, and how that is dealing with, or in other ways perhaps related to, a kind of existential exploration, as well as the ability of Varda and her camera eye to pick up the intricacies and nuances and minutiae of day-to-day living, whether it be in the faces of the people that pass by on the streets, whether it be in the architecture of the corners of the frame that would otherwise go unnoticed, or whether it be a sly, funny wink of the eye to the audience, telling us that she is also Varda is also a playful and inventive filmmaker, as well as being someone who is concerned about the moment and the human being and the souls and the real heartbeat of the city that's made up of the people and the places. So I think those are, in essence, some of the themes that can be touched upon when thinking about Around Paris. So speaking of the Program 3 disc itself, we have a number of films. First, we have the extraordinary work, which is listed in the book here as being from 1962, and this is Cléo from 5 to 7 in English, or Cléo de 5 à 7. And then we have a number of relatively shorter works, which is, first of all, Les Fiancés du Pont Macdonald, and this is also listed in the book as being from 1962. And then the work L'Opéra Mouffe, which is listed as being from 1958. And then Les Dites Cariatides, which is listed as being from 1984. And then Tas de beaux escaliers, tu sais, which is listed as being from 1986. Plus, there are a number of supplements included in which are further some other films that are often included in the complete filmography of Agnes Varda, and we'll get to those when we talk about the supplements. But those are the films that are listed here. And so we have a really interesting mix of films from the early part of Varda's career and also from the 1980s part of Varda's career. So we get, again, another eclectic mix from different points of her filmography. The first point we should focus on is the extraordinary work, which is Cléo de 5 à 7, so Cléo from 5 to 7. This is a must-see for anyone who is interested in French cinema, who is interested in the works of Varda, and who is interested in watching excellent cinema, period. The film, Cléo, from 5 to 7, is in essence covering a window of time of a particular young woman and what she has to do during this time while she is awaiting some medical-related news that might or might not be very significant in terms of her own life. And from that starting point, or from that essential narrative point, we get an extraordinary blend of different tones and facets and styles that I think sum up in a rich and quite fascinating way the trajectory of the concerns, the real humanistic and thematic and cinematic concerns of Agnes Varda, the filmmaker. And so what do I mean by this? So if I were to be as general as possible, I would say that we get in this film the idea of the chic and the cool Parisian lifestyle as inhabited or exhibited by this young woman. And we see certain facets of her particular lifestyle involving singing pop songs, going from place to place, cafes, and meeting various people along the way, and the dress and the fashion and the decor as well as visiting various places and landmarks of the city of Paris. So that's one aspect that I think is really fascinating. Linked to that, we have the idea associated with this particular character, Cléo, and her own thematic or her own character concerns. We have explorations set forth in thematic and narrative contexts, but also in quite striking visual and cinematic expressions. We have the exploration of death, or to be more specific, we have explorations of birth, life, and death, although perhaps not necessarily in that order. Perhaps it's probably more appropriate to associate those themes in the order of, say, not birth, life, and death, but say death, birth, life, or maybe life, death, birth, or maybe death, life, birth, or something like that. In other words, there seems to be this focus in on death. There's also a focus in on life, and also the idea of birth or rebirth or transformation, and the notions of maybe death can equal not necessarily an end, but it can equal a transformation. And so in that sense, I think we have a fascinating exploration of a really existential trajectory and journey of a particular character. And another reason why this film is so wonderful, and it's associated with this idea of the exploration of life, of birth, life, and death, is that existential journey is also made quite linked with the exploration of the city. And that in turn leads to, I think, a really existential meditation, if you will, on the notion of self and the notion of place. What is it about the place that either reveals something about the self or is otherwise distant or separate from the self? How is it that the environment that this particular character is in either says something about her own existence or otherwise denies something about her own existence? How is she connected with the world around her, or how is she separated from the world around her? And those sorts of, I think, quite telling and probing questions are always at the fore whenever we watch this film. So that's another really telling and important theme. And also we have really another reason why this film, Cleo from 5 to 7, is extraordinary is that we have what I would say is keen-eyed, masterful filmmaking that is operating on quite a complex set of levels, which is, I think, something we've already seen from Varda in the early explorations of the other discs that are included in this set. And those thematic or those cinematic concerns of Varda are, I think, if we were to be very, very basic, it's much more complicated than this, I acknowledge, but to be very general, I would say that in this film as well, as we have seen in her other films, it is basically twofold. First, we have an eye that is very playful in terms of its cinematic wit and style and verve. And so we have examples, quite striking examples here in this film, of the artistry of Varda, the way that her camera seems to be very playful. The editing is sharp and purposeful. The way that music, or non-music, as the case may be, interweaves into the scenery and the visuals to create moments that suddenly turn into cinematic flourishes that seem to transcend the quote-unquote reality of the situation. These are examples of where Varda, as the cinematic poet, turns her artistic eye into a sort of beautiful lens, if you will. And she's playing not just in terms of sound and image, but also color and black and white, and editing and close-ups and the use of space and time. And so these concerns as a cinematic artist, I think, are at the fore quite strikingly and quite memorably. The other aspect of Varda's filmmaking style that I think is on display here is her camera eye capturing the real. And what I mean by this is the camera seems to also be concerned with the personages of the place, the people, the regular, everyday passers-by that seem to be walking the streets as we see our main character go from shop window to shop window. Around her we see the living, breathing city. And of course, inhabiting that living, breathing city are the people. And so Varda's camera catches these people in their moments, they're living their lives. And that is also very interesting too, because not only is it a means by which Varda is exercising her documentarian type of cinematic concern, which we have seen elsewhere, and we see it quite prominently and so well pronounced in this film Cleo from 5 to 7. But this is also another wonderful way in which all of her themes in this film seem to be interconnected. For example, this notion of the documentary capturing of moments and people around in the city captures elements of the city that is going on, captures elements of the human beings, the people that really inhabit the place, the souls of the place. But also we see how this kind of interesting juxtaposition helps us further to understand just how either integrated our main character is with the rest of the society, or how isolated she is from the rest of the society. And so the documentary type of look of aspects of the film really help to fuel and propel the other similar and very closely related aspects of the film involving the existential journey, our hero and what it is she has to go through, her own journey through the city and her own inner struggles, as well as who she is, the explorations of birth, life, and death, and the like. And at the same time, while all this is going on, we have Varda turning on her cinematic, poetic eye. So it's all happening at once here in this remarkable film, Cleo from 5 to 7. And to end, let me say that the film also deals with space and time that is very telling. It shows us, as I say, the details and intricacies of how we or how characters deal with significant events and also day-to-day events. And are they separate or are they one and the same? And that in turn leads us to an exploration as to not just how time is presented in cinema, but how time is worked out in our own lives and what it is we do in the space of a particular window of hours that is either furthering our own lives in a productive way, or perhaps is a way in which we are either using or maybe misusing our time such that not such that, but in face of particular events that could really shift and change the trajectory of our own lives as we know it. So, and the film captures this notion of time really well. Time as existential exploration, time as fate, and also time as something to be savored as well, as a human thing, as a human joy, as well as something that is unavoidable. And so I think it is all here, and it is all being explored in a very complex, nuanced brush of cinematic artistry that is the artist Agnes Varda. So this is the film Cleo from 5 to 7. It's an extraordinary work, so if you haven't seen it, I really recommend checking it out if you can. When we talk about the film Cleo from 5 to 7, I should point out the history of the film really briefly vis-a-vis the Criterion Collection, because it has appeared in the Criterion Collection before. In fact, it has appeared at spine number 73. The first time it appeared was on this earlier DVD disc, which it's an older release by the Criterion Collection. So it came, as you see here, with its own little booklet and the disc here. And it was, I would say, it was a decent release. Then the Criterion Collection, sometime later, released this really quite remarkable set on DVD at spine number 418, which had a number of films, again on DVD, which is called 4 by Agnes Varda. And one of the so-called 4 that was included was the disc here for Cleo from 5 to 7, which listed the film as being from 1961 on the back here, by the way. And so we had this disc on DVD, and it looked great. I thought it looked really, really great. And it had a number of supplements as well, which I'll get to in a moment. And then now we have the Blu-ray set here from Criterion. Now, I don't see any indication of a spine number on the set itself, as I've indicated before, but just note that Cleo from 5 to 7 does exist in the Criterion Collection catalog at spine number 73 for your information. And I think the film now looks really fantastic, right? Because it's, according to the materials, this is based off of a 2K restoration. And I thought the earlier disc DVD, by the way, looked really great. I thought it looked really fantastic. But now we have this new upgrade, as it were. As for the supplements, I think that we have a number of great supplements here. And for the most part, everything that we saw on the earlier box set DVD release is included in the Blu-ray for the supplements for Cleo from 5 to 7. So first we have around a 36-minute work called Remembrances, 2005. And this is a documentary about the making of the film, or remembering back on the making of the film Cleo from 5 to 7. And it has one-on-one interviews with Varda herself. And it also has interviews with the actors of the film, in particular, Corinne Marchand, who is the actor who plays Cleo. And so, as well as Antoine Bourseiller. And so this is quite an interesting documentary because it's a making of, but it's also a looking back, remembrances. And so in an interesting way, it has also to do with the notion of the passage of time. Not necessarily time passage as encapsulated in the moment of the space of the running time as we saw in Cleo from 5 to 7, but the notion of time in terms of looking back, and looking back after a number of years have passed, and revisiting places that were part of the scenery and the decor of the film and the like. And so that's an interesting concept. And again, it really shows how Varda's works are very much they are really nuanced, and they are, I think, operating on many different levels. So I think this is a great example of that. So, and it's also a nice way to revisit the film in a loving, charming, and quite warm portrait. So that is one of the supplements. And then we have another supplement, which is an excerpt from a French TV, Madonna, C'est Madonna, from 1993. And this is approximately 2 minutes and 25 seconds. And this is an excerpt from a French television program where we had Agnès Varda and Madonna and other guests as well appear. And it's I think sometimes it's described as being a conversation between Madonna and Varda, but in fact it's more about Varda and her impressions, if you will, of Madonna. And also Madonna, I think at the time it was about Madonna and how she might be optioning the rights to, or not optioning, but she might have been able to acquire the rights to make or remake the film Cleo from 5 to 7. I think the point of that, though, was to show that Madonna was a real admirer of the film and of Varda's works. And I think Varda was very complimentary in terms of Madonna. And there's a really interesting exchange about how she seems to analyze the word provocation or provocation. That's a really interesting analysis of a particular word, le mot. So it's worth checking out if you can. And then we have an interesting 2005 little supplement, which is an exploration of the route or the tour or the places in Paris that were explored in Cleo from 5 to 7. And this is called Cleo's Real Path Through Paris. Pierre William Glenn, 2005. So this is also from the earlier DVD, and it's an interesting short film with a really nice music accompaniment. And then we have a new supplement which hadn't appeared in any previous DVD release. And this is called The Music of Michel Legrand. And this is a video essay from 2016. This is by Tony Zhou and Taylor Ramos. And this was for Filmstruck. And this talks about certain musical styles and motifs, and the way in which the music is incorporated into the film, and how it serves to function to further the film in terms of the addition of music, or maybe the use of silence and the like. And so it's a really fascinating essay. It's 9 minutes. I think I would have loved to have seen it go on to the very end. It kind of goes and it stops around a certain point regarding the film, and I feel like it could have gone on to cover maybe the latter parts of the film. But be that as it may, I think the essay itself, the visual essay itself, is quite fascinating. So that's worth checking out. And then we have the trailer for Cleo from 5 to 7. So that's the supplement, and that's a great trailer, by the way, so you check it out. It's really cool. So those are the supplements that are included for Cleo from 5 to 7 in the set. I should point out that the earlier DVD had a supplement that is not carried over, at least as far as I am aware. And it's what we saw in the earlier DVD was a slideshow presentation of paintings by Hans Baldung Green. And it had paintings, works, for instance, Death and the Maiden, etc. And the significance of the inclusion of these paintings in the slideshow presentation that we had in the earlier DVD was that, according to Varda, in Remembrances, these paintings were served as a source of inspiration for the character of Cleo herself. And I would say also that in terms of the film, they serve as a kind of reminder, or a way in which we can see just how the film is heavily reliant on expressions of death and expressions of the threat of death and mortality. And I think the slideshow presentation here, it's a very brief one, but the exploration and the very brief exploration of Hans Baldung, I thought was really worth it, and it's a shame, therefore, that it's not carried over here onto the Blu-ray set, because I think it would have helped to further round out that exploration of, as I say, mortality and death and Cleo. But anyway, just for your information, it is brief, and so you can still look up the information online and other resource channels if you are interested. But for the most part, everything else is included, with the exception of the new video essay on the music. So really good stuff vis-a-vis Cleo from 5 to 7. And then continuing on with the other films in the disc for Program 3. So first we have Les Fiancés du Pont MacDonald, and this is translated into English as The Fiancés of the MacDonald Bridge. And this is also given the title Ou méfiez-vous des lunettes noires. And so this is the film, or very short film, that is part of the film Cleo from 5 to 7. So if you know the film Cleo from 5 to 7, you know that at one point we see a little short silent film. And so this is said silent film, a very interesting one, and it features Anna Karina and Jean-Luc Godard among many people. And so we see, and this is listed as being from 1962 according to the book and according to the materials found in other parts of the Blu-ray set. It was included also as a supplement to the earlier DVD. I should point out that it's described on the back as being from 1961 for the DVD. So now we have it described as being from 1962. It's fascinating because we see the way in which Varda is also a filmmaker that is part of a community of filmmakers. Also, she is a filmmaker that is very knowledgeable of certain cinematic styles, silent cinema, the way that the characters, in particular the character played by Godard himself, looks. He has a Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd type of look about him, and so he has this the way that the camera captures this is fascinating. And there's a certain sense of comic style, of almost slapstick comedy, the way in which emotions are played out in a visual, physical way, and so it's very playful and it's very fun. And also I should point out that the supplement for this is a short introduction or interview with Varda from 2005, according to the supplements guide in the book. And this is a very interesting one because it's a film, or it's a discussion where she talks about certain aspects working with these performers, and also she talks about the glasses. And there's one little anecdote about how she always wanted to see Jean-Luc Godard's eyes, right? Because Jean-Luc Godard, as you know, is someone who is often seen wearing his sunglasses, and so it was a nice opportunity for Varda to see his beautiful eyes, according to her. So it's a wonderful little tidbit of information, if you will. So that's really great to have. And to continue on, we have the other films. Then we have the film which is described as being from 1958 called L'Opéra Mouffe. And this is another fascinating short film. I want to call it documentary, but it's not quite that, and I'll get to that in a moment. Well, I'll get to that right now because it's a film that is on the one hand, it is a kind of documentary, a visual essay capturing a particular area of the city at the time. And so we see focusing on faces of these individuals, in particular these elderly men and women in this particular part of the city. And we see close-ups of their faces, and we see them walking in crowds, and the camera lingers in on a number of these individuals, men and women. And we see them talking with each other, or them standing alone, silent. And it provides a kind of meditation, if you will, which is further enhanced, I might add, by the other components of this film. We have the outset, which is the presentation of the human body and a pregnant woman. And then we have also interspersed along the way a young couple, young men and women, and their interactions on a physical level. And so we have all these elements coming together here. And I think these seemingly disparate elements are juxtaposed in such a profound way, which is another further enhancement, if you will, or further exploration of Varda's style. Namely that we have seen up to now, including Cleo from 5 to 7, we have seen Varda concerned with capturing a moment in time or a place, and then the way she captures it is through documentary tools, or also through poetic cinematic tools, for lack of a better phrase. And so here I think we have the same kind of juxtapositions. We have setups of characters that are obviously setups in terms of composed framing, a young man and a young woman, and they are in very intimate settings, or we have setups of the human body of an expecting mother-to-be. And so these are obviously composed frames and shots. And then we have juxtaposed to that other shots of the city and the elderly population. And we see the camera seems to be lingering and capturing their faces. And so this juxtaposition, again, shows the multi-layered cinematic approach of Varda. And I dare say, too, that we are seeing a wonderful way in which the human interactive experience seems to be part and parcel with the experience of living in the city, and how the experience of living in the city is multifaceted, and it's quite myriad, and it's a reflection of how expansive each of our own lives and existences are when we live in a big city like Paris. And I think that is also mirroring what we saw in Cleo from 5 to 7, also in terms of the way in which the human body seems to be either isolated from or intimately connected with the environment around one. And so I think that was made striking in Cleo, and that's also made striking here in L'Opéra Mouffe. And so this is really, I think, one of the essential works to show Varda's style and concern. So it's bravo for its inclusion as part of Around Paris. And we have part of that as well, I should say, the introduction that Varda gives here. It's really essential, and I think it's quite short. It's only 2 minutes, but she's talking about this area of Paris and what her concerns were, and also she makes a really interesting point about how the timing of the release or the showing of the film linked with her own life and her own family and the birth of her own child. And so this is another great example of how Varda's cinema is Varda herself. So the interview is really great to have. It's quite short, but well worth it. So check that out if you can. And then to continue on, we have the next film, which is a little bit of a jump in the chronology. We now go to 1984, and this is Les Dites Caryatides, or in English, the so-called Caryatides. And the Caryatides here are referring to these statues of women, and these are like pillars or support beams that we see in various parts of the architecture of Paris. And it's another interesting short film that is part of the exploration of the city, in that we have these statues of women. They are nude or semi-nude, and we have the way in which they seem to be blending into the background in one way of looking at it, or they seem to be part and parcel with the city living experience itself. There's of course a history to this, to these statues themselves, and I'll get to that in a moment, and how that history is linked to Varda's concerns and her own observations about the city, and also about literature and art, and I'll get to that in a moment as well. It's a fascinating combination. What's so great about this, I should say too, is that this is also an example of how Varda is observing things that would otherwise go unnoticed. Of course, we know that this is a film that was commissioned, and we know that it was a film that was meant to be part of an exploration of the city. So, but at the same time, we see Varda and her camera looking at specific aspects of these statues and their shapes and how they interact with the day-to-day citizens. Also, how she has a playfulness about her. There's an interesting little way that she introduces the work in terms of the idea of nudity. There's nudity all around us, in a sense, and it's a funny concept. So we see Varda being the playful, witty cineast and artist that she is. She is also, again, using her camera eye and observing things, the details of the city that might otherwise go unnoticed. And it's all here. And we get a wonderful indication from the 2007 brief introduction that is included as part of the supplements. It's brief, it's less than a minute, but so much packed in these, whatever it is, 51 seconds or so. And because she makes a point about how she discovered along the way during the making of this film that most of the statues that she was covering here, the caryatides of the title, the so-called caryatides, that many of these works were dating from around the 1860s. And so she felt, therefore, that there was a real plausible and full link with Baudelaire. And so therefore that provides the link between the film, the caryatides, the concerns of Varda, and Baudelaire. And so we have therefore this film further enveloping the sensibilities of Varda and her views on literature and art and the city. And so it all becomes one. That's another fascinating thing. And it's an exploration of Paris. So perfect for the inclusion in Around Paris and so much more. So this is great. And I should say, also as part of the supplements to this, we have another extra, which is called Les Dites Caryatides bis from 2005, which is a follow-up to Les Dites Caryatides. And this is these are excerpts shot on My Eye Tells Me video, and these are extra bits of things that, according to the supplements, were things that were sort of follow-ups to her work, Les Cariatides. And so we see shots of these other places, these other statues, as well as quick intertitles. And it's also shot in a type of museum exhibition type of way, but it's also very fresh in terms of its visual video style. It's a really interesting further exploration of the city and time and place. But the time and place is, of course, the place might be the same, but the time is, of course, very different. And indeed, the places themselves, specifically speaking, might be a little bit different than what we saw in the earlier work. So again, we're seeing the way in which time and place change, and how her sensibilities as an artist, Varda's, have changed or have remained consistent, depending on your outlook as a viewer. So another fascinating potential juxtaposition in terms of comparative analysis, as well as seeing Varda's own concerns and love of the city continue on into the 2000s. So this is Les Cariatides bis, another supplement well worth checking out. Then, to round out the films, we have the film from 1986, and this is T'as de beaux escaliers, tu sais, or You Have Beautiful Stairs, you know. And this is a very short film, and this is in line with the Cinémathèque in Paris, and at the time this was at the Palais de Chaillot. And according to Varda, in the included 2007 introduction as part of the supplements here, which is a great one, you should check it out, she does talk about how that it had a certain set of stairs, and how this led her to the inspiration to create a film that was about, or that was a celebration of stairs in cinema, which is an interesting concept. And one might think that on the one hand it's a very playful film, and it is, and it shows various clips of cinema along the way, and it's done in a very wonderful edited way, and edited style, very clever. It's also a further reminder of how place is very much linked with the human experience. And it's such an interesting concept about how stairs are seen in some clips to be a way to celebrate human life and human existence, a way to celebrate our relationships. People, stairs in cinema and musicals. Also, stairs seem to be an indication of some kind of entrance into the scene, and how that is also very significant in terms of our own lives. Also, stairs seem to be a separating factor. Sometimes we see characters fighting on stairs or separating themselves on stairs and the like. And it reminds us too of how stairs are significant in other films by Varda, including Cleo from 5 to 7, I dare say. There are a number of scenes in that film that are very much linked to characters traversing up or down stairs in particular parts of the film. So this is quite a I think an ingenious work, and it's very fun, but it's also very much part of the Varda experience, if you will, of observing things that might go unnoticed, or the way in which space and time are interacting with our own human experiences. And in particular here, and how this particular set of stairs in Paris at the time inspired her to explore that. So another great, fascinating inclusion in this Programme 3 around Paris. So that's T'as de beaux escaliers, tu sais, from 1986. Very short. It's approximately 3 minutes or so. But it's well worth it if you have the opportunity. Plus the introduction by Varda from 2007 as well. Well worth it if you can. So with that is Programme 3. The Around Paris disc. As for the films themselves and their connection with this theme around Paris, around Paris, I think it is a really fine example of criterion curation. And it has helped me further to understand and appreciate and realize just how important place and time and space and emotion are to the experience of watching a Varda film. Paris, and parts of Paris in particular, are very important to Varda The place is very important to her. We see this here, and we will see it time and time again. And so it's wonderful to get this exploration here, as I say, linked to one of her most extraordinary feature films ever, which is Cleo from 5 to 7. So a wonderful overall program, this program 3, around Paris, around Paris, in the complete films of Agnès Varda. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. So until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. Stay safe, stay strong, and cheers.